Would you open your Bibles, please, to the book of Acts, chapter 24. Acts chapter 24. As you're opening your Bibles, I need to say something about the coming week. As you know, things, shall we say, in our country politically have gone nuts. And what balance there was in the political dialogue has now gone to extremes on both sides. And that's most unfortunate. It happens in every country. We're just not used to it happening in ours, but it is happening in ours. I want to give you a heads up about ourselves and being aware of us and people around us and what is happening to us. You say, what do you mean by that? It's probably not what you expect. We, as human beings, are creations of God. He made us. And as King David said, we are fearfully, that's awesomely, and wonderfully made. Our bodies are really astonishing mechanisms. When somebody says we evolved, I just scratch my head and say, wherever did you get that idea? Because what we have here is an astonishing mechanism, from the human eye to the human brain to the different organs working in concert with each other. It's really an amazing thing. Being fearfully and wonderfully made, God, in this time of the fall, which started with Adam and Eve and put the world under a curse, we have certain things about our bodies that actually help us in a fallen world. One of these mechanisms that we have is called fight or flight. Now, I'm not getting psychological on you here. It happens to be not a psychological idea, but a physical fact. Because if you've ever been threatened, and all of you have, something has happened that scared you or threatened you, you get what we call an adrenaline rush, don't you? Not only does your body feel different, you're getting ready to either fight or flight or flee, but your brain gets extra sharp. And that adrenaline rush going into your brain is like, wow! And frankly, even though it might have been a scary or terrifying event that caused that later on you look back and you go, but I really liked that feeling. Now here's another thing. As a law enforcement chaplain for the years that I was doing that, and Pastor Jim had done that for a number of years too, you learn certain things about what's called critical incident stress, which is counseling people afterwards, helping them through events that could cause things like post-traumatic stress. We don't want that, so there are things to mitigate that. But in order to do that, you have to understand brain chemistry to a certain extent. I'm certainly no doctor, there's no way. But it is true that when a traumatic event happens or a fearful event happens, that your brain says, I really don't know what just happened. Help me cope with this. Your body does something very interesting. At the demand of your brain, it shoots all these chemicals up into your brain in order to help you cope. That's the adrenaline rush that you get when you're threatened. But when something really bad happens or you're threatened, you're not only getting adrenaline going up into your brain, there's actually 23 different, this is medical, measurable chemicals that shoot up into your brain. Not the least of which is adrenaline and something called endorphins. Now, if you're not familiar with endorphins, if you've ever been a long-distance jogger, which I was when I was much thinner, for about 6 months, and that was it. I said, that was fun, but that's enough. But when you jog for a long distance, it hurts at first, and then after you jog for a certain amount of distance, suddenly you feel pretty good. It actually like, wow, this is really cool. I could keep going. You're nodding. Yeah, you know. Because your body is sending endorphins in your brain to mitigate the stress and the pain that your body might be feeling. It comes under stress. It comes when there is distress. It comes when there is fear. It comes when there is threat. Which is why good news is not as popular as bad news. Because when we get bad or distressing news, your brain is saying, help me cope with this. Your body is sending a certain amount of chemicals into your brain to help you do that. Which is why, and we have to admit it, people thrive on bad news. Why is it that the news on TV and news media specializes in bad news and really doesn't care that much about good news? But we say we want more good news, but good news doesn't cause brain chemistry things to happen. It makes us happy, but the adrenaline's not there and the endorphins are not there. But when bad news happens, we go into a minor or sometimes major, depending on the news you hear, fight or flight, or critical instant stress mode, maybe a very tiny bit. Critical instant stress being you've witnessed like something horrendous and you go into shock because you've seen something so terrible. Most of you have experienced that. That's like a shark bite. What I'm talking about is like being nibbled to death by minnows. Here's what I want you to know. With all the bad news that's out there, all the fake news that's out there, all the stuff that's being put in our direction from all these many sources, many of these sources are capitalizing on the knowledge that this is how our brain works. And what is happening is that America, most Americans, including us, and we got to be aware of this, have become addicted to fear because our brain chemistry really likes it. And the more fear we have, the more distress we have, the more our brain wants to react to it, wants to get out and do something about it, wants to shore ourselves up against it. And I will tell you clearly, it is an intoxication. And it has, for extended periods of time, being exposed to this sort of thing, become, for most Americans, an addiction. I've got to have more of it and increasing and in an increasing manner. That's important to know in light of the fact that the stuff that I know that we are all being exposed to on any level of media at this time. Whether you read a newspaper, whatever that is, or you're reading things online, or you're listening to radio talk show hosts or whatever, tell me the ones that give the good news. Or if you know them, why don't you listen to them more and listen less to the guys with the bad news? Because it's intoxicating. Because it is literally, physically intoxicating with the brain chemistry that's happening. So I am putting this out as a pastor, a warning. We Christians need to stay on topic. Our lives are about good news, but it's not intoxicating like the bad news that's out there. And I have spoken to people, and maybe one of you, and I hope I didn't offend you, and if I'm not thinking of anybody in this room, it had to be somebody from outside this room, so there's nobody in here. But somebody came and they said, but all this stuff is happening, and what's happening, and what have you. And the question that comes up is, so good, what are you going to do about it? See, it's the intoxication, because I can't really do anything about it, unless you want to become violent, and then you got a real problem. So with all the politics that's going on in this world, and especially in this country, and all the things that we're saying, but people are saying, but you need to hear this, you need to know that. And if you have a computer and you're watching stuff on the computer, YouTubes and what have you, and they say, watch this before it's taken down. It's a drug. And it feels real good going in. And it feels real good stewing around in your head, even though it raises your blood pressure and your stress level. It's a drunkenness. And there are so many different groups with names and without names that put this stuff up there. On the left, Antifa. On the right, QAnon. Both of them out of the pit of hell. Because all they want to do is light a fire under you that you can't do anything about and causes you to stew and polarize, and perhaps they can get people to get involved in violent acts on both sides of the aisle. Because they know this is how people work. They've done their homework. Now you know. Don't get drunk on the bad news. I think it's an irony in the Bible that the way it translates into the English language, where Paul says, be sober and alert. I think it's Paul. Be sober and alert, but be sober. And I'm thinking, that's the way it translates out. It basically means be self-controlled. But I like the word sober in this case because part of being sober is being self-controlled. I'm not going to take this in. I'm going to say I'm going to involve myself with the one thing that counts and will last for all eternity. And that's this. It's Him. That's our message, the gospel. And the gospel is good news.